I told my best friend a secret about my past, but when my mom confronted me at dinner, I realized that the person I trusted most couldn't keep quiet. My name's Emily, I'm 27, and I've always been the kind of person who keeps most things bottled up. Not because I don't trust people, but because trusting people has rarely ended well for me. I live in a small town in Oregon, where everyone seems to know everyone's business, and secrets travel faster than wildfire. I work as a nurse in the pediatric ward of the local hospital, and most of my days are spent listening to other people's stories, parents panicking, kids crying, doctors yelling orders. But outside of work, my life's been pretty quiet, or at least it was until a few weeks ago, when one small moment of misplaced trust started to unravel everything I built to keep my past hidden. I've been best friends with Clara for almost 6 years. We met during my first week on the job. She was a new nurse too, just a few months ahead of me, and we clicked instantly. We'd spend lunch breaks trading patient stories, venting about supervisors, and laughing over ridiculous things like whose scrubs had more coffee stains. Over time, she became the sister I never had. She'd come over to my apartment for movie nights, bring soup when I was sick, and was even my maid of honor at my wedding to Ryan, though that marriage barely lasted 2 years before it crumbled under the weight of something I never told anyone. That something is what this whole mess is about. You see, there's a part of my life before Oregon that I've kept buried. Back when I was 21, I lived in California, and things were complicated. I was in college, dating this guy named Ethan, who at the time felt like my whole world. He was older, charming, confident, with that kind of dangerous energy that makes you feel both thrilled and terrified at once. My parents never liked him, especially my mom. She used to say, "There's something about him that hides too much." And she was right. Ethan wasn't who I thought he was. We'd been together for almost a year when everything went downhill. One night, after a party, we got into a horrible argument while driving home. He'd been drinking, I'd been crying. It was the kind of chaos you can't explain logically afterward. I begged him to pull over, but he wouldn't. And then, within seconds, headlights flashed, brakes screamed, and everything shattered. The crash killed a man on a motorcycle. Ethan survived. I survived, but nothing about me was ever the same. The police came. There was an investigation. Ethan's lawyer made it look like I was the one driving. And the worst part, for a brief moment, I couldn't even remember if I had been. I'd grabbed the wheel to stop him, maybe, but memory plays tricks when adrenaline and guilt mix. I spent weeks replaying it, over and over, until I stopped sleeping. Eventually, my name was cleared, but the case nearly destroyed me. My parents helped cover the legal costs, and my mom made me swear never to talk about it again. We moved states. I changed schools, changed everything. For years, that secret stayed locked inside me. Ryan, the man I married later, never knew. My coworkers didn't, not even Clara. But guilt has a way of festering, and a few weeks ago, on one of those long, wine-fueled nights, I told her everything. We were sitting on my balcony after a double shift, our scrubs still wrinkled, our hair tied up in messy buns. I remember the air being thick and heavy, like the world was waiting for me to say something it already knew. She'd been talking about her boyfriend's jealousy issues, and somehow that spiraled into a conversation about mistakes, about how people do things they can't take back. And before I realized it, I'd told her about Ethan, the accident, the trial, the shame. Every detail. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just sat there, wide-eyed, her hand covering her mouth. When I finished, she whispered, "Emily, Jesus, you've been carrying that alone." I nodded. She promised she'd never tell a soul. And I believed her. I wanted to believe her. The next few days were normal, or so I thought. We texted about work, sent memes, talked about meal prep ideas, but something in her tone changed subtly. She'd avoid eye contact during shifts. Her hugs felt shorter, her laughter forced. I chalked it up to stress. Until the night my mom called. It was a Sunday evening, and I just sat down to dinner at my parents' house. My dad was carving roast chicken. My younger brother was teasing me about being single again, and my mom was setting out her famous mashed potatoes. It was one of those calm, homey dinners that make you forget time exists. Then, out of nowhere, she put down her fork and said, "Emily, there's something I need to ask you." The way she said it made the hair on my arms stand up. Her voice wasn't angry, it was cautious, like she was testing the ground before stepping on it. I looked up, forcing a smile. "Sure, Mom. What's up?" She hesitated. Were you ever involved in an accident? Back when you lived in California?" My heart dropped straight into my stomach. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard her. My dad froze mid-bite, and my brother looked up, confused. I tried to laugh it off. "What? Why would you ask that?" But my voice cracked in the middle of the sentence, and that was enough for her to know. Her expression hardened, not angry, but disappointed, like a door closing between us. "Emily," she said quietly, "someone told me about it. About the accident. About the man who died, and about Ethan." I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, tighter. I could hear the clinking of my dad's knife against his plate, the slow creak of his chair as he turned toward me. My mind raced through 100 possibilities, but I only landed on one name, Clara. My mom didn't even have to say it. I could see it in her eyes. The uncertainty, the hurt, the confusion. I'd trusted Clara with the one thing I'd sworn to keep buried, and somehow it had found its way back to the person I'd tried hardest to protect from it. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mom kept talking, her voice trembling now, asking why I'd never told her, if I'd been guilty, if we'd paid someone off. My brother asked what she was talking about. My dad demanded names. But I just sat there, staring at my plate, my pulse thundering in my ears. Every word they spoke blurred into noise. When I finally managed to stand up, my legs felt like they were made of glass. "I need to go," I muttered. My dad called after me, but I was already grabbing my bag and my keys. I drove off into the night, a tears burning down my face, my phone buzzing nonstop. Calls from my mom, texts from Clara, a voicemail from Ryan for some reason. Because apparently word travels faster than guilt. And that's how it started, the unraveling. The secret I'd buried so deeply was out, clawing its way through the people I loved most. I didn't know yet how Clara had told her, or why, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing in my life would be the same after that dinner. The drive home that night felt like a blur. I don't even remember the streets I took. I just remember gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles turned white. My chest felt heavy, my mind replaying my mother's voice like a scratched record. Someone told me about it, about Ethan, about the accident. Every word echoed through me, louder each time. I kept shaking my head, whispering to myself that it couldn't be true, that Clara wouldn't do that. She promised. She swore. By the time I got back to my apartment, my phone had 23 missed calls, 15 from Mom, 3 from Dad, and 5 from Clara. There were also 2 texts from Ryan. That part confused me most. Ryan and I hadn't spoken in nearly a year, not since our divorce had been finalized. Why would he reach out now? But I didn't have the mental strength to think about him. I threw my phone onto the couch, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the carpet, feeling the adrenaline crash into exhaustion. I don't know how long I sat there before the first knock came at the door. It was past midnight, and at first, I thought maybe it was one of my neighbors complaining about the noise. But I hadn't even made a sound. The knocking came again, 3 sharp taps. I forced myself to stand and looked through the peephole. It was Clara. Her face looked pale under the hallway light, her hair tied back, her eyes red and puffy. I opened the door just a crack. "Emily," she said immediately, her voice trembling. "Please let me explain." I wanted to slam the door in her face. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she could hear it. But I stepped aside just enough for her to walk in. She stood in the living room, clutching her purse, twisting the strap between her fingers. "Explain," I said flatly. She started crying almost instantly. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I swear, Emily, I didn't mean to tell her." The anger hit me like a wave. "You didn't mean to tell my mother that I was involved in a man's death. Clara, what did you think would happen?" She shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. "It wasn't like that. Your mom came to the hospital last week. She was visiting one of the nurses, one of the older ladies in maternity. I ran into her in the hallway. We started talking, just small talk, and she said how proud she was of you. I don't even know how it came up, but she mentioned that she was always worried about you when you lived in California. And I just said something stupid. I said I understood why she worried, because you'd been through so much back then." I stared at her in disbelief. "That's not just something stupid, Clara!" "You opened the door to everything I tried to keep locked away." I didn't mean to tell her the details, she said, her voice breaking. But she asked me what I meant. She looked so confused, so worried, and I panicked. I said too much. I told her there'd been an accident, that it wasn't your fault, that it was a hard time in your life. I thought she already knew. I swear. Emily, I thought she knew. My stomach twisted. She didn't know, I said quietly. She never did. For a moment, there was only silence between us. The air felt thick with everything that couldn't be taken back. Clara wiped her eyes, but the guilt on her face was undeniable. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was trying to defend you, not hurt you. I thought she might already know, and I wanted her to understand why you're so careful about everything, why you're so private." I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My mom made me promise never to bring it up again. She spent years trying to bury it. And now it's all back, like none of it ever went away." Clara stood there crying quietly, looking like a child who'd broken something irreplaceable. And part of me wanted to comfort her. She wasn't malicious, just careless. But the damage was done, and no amount of tears could fix it. I told her I needed space. She nodded, biting her lip, and left without another word. When the door closed, I collapsed into my hands and sobbed until my throat burned. It felt like the past had crawled out of the grave I buried it in, dragging all my peace down with it. The next morning, I woke up to 3 emails from my mom. The first was calm, the second was desperate, and the third was angry. In that last one, she said something I'll never forget. "If you could lie to us about something like that, Emily, what else have you lied about?" That sentence stuck with me all day at work. I could barely focus. Every time a patient called my name, I flinched. Every time someone mentioned family, I felt like I was being stabbed in the chest. Clara kept her distance, but the looks between us were unbearable. Our coworkers noticed, of course. You can't hide tension like that in a hospital. By the afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I went outside, sat in my car, and called my mom back. She answered instantly. "Emily." Her tone was sharp, guarded. "Mom," I said softly. "I didn't lie. I was trying to protect you. You told me to forget it, remember? I told you to move on, not to hide the truth from your own family." She snapped. "Do you have any idea how it felt to hear from someone else that my daughter was part of a man's death?" I flinched. "Mom, it wasn't like that. You know it wasn't. I only know what she told me," she said bitterly. "That there was a crash, that a man died, and that your boyfriend tried to blame you. That you could have gone to prison. Is that true?" I felt my throat tighten. "Yes," I whispered. "But I was cleared. You know that." She sighed heavily. "I thought it was over. I thought it didn't define you anymore. But if you're still keeping it secret, if you can't even trust your family with the truth, then maybe it still does. That cut deeper than anything she could have yelled. We hung up after a few strained minutes. I sat in my car long after the call ended, staring at the dashboard, wondering how a few words could tear down years of fragile peace. That night, I poured myself another glass of wine, something I'd promised myself I wouldn't do anymore, and stared at the city lights outside my window. I kept thinking about how fragile trust really is. It takes years to build, seconds to destroy. I didn't even know who I was angry at anymore. Clara for telling, my mom for reacting, or myself for thinking I could outrun my past. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't want to look. But I did. It was a message from Ryan. "Hey, I heard something about California. Are you okay?" My stomach twisted. How the hell did he find out? Before I could respond, another text came through. "Your mom called me. Said she was worried you might hurt yourself. I just wanted to check in." I put the phone down and stared at it. My mom had called Ryan, my ex-husband, the man who left me because I was too emotionally distant. The man who once said, "You're hiding something from me, Emily, and it's eating you alive." I didn't know if I should laugh or cry. Instead, I poured the rest of the wine down the sink, sat on the floor, and tried to breathe. But the truth was sinking in fast. This wasn't just about a secret anymore. It was about how easily one truth can unravel every relationship built on silence. And I had no idea what would happen next. The next few days felt like living under a microscope. Every person in my life suddenly seemed to know something, even if they didn't say it out loud. My mom stopped calling, which in some ways hurt more than the voicemails. My dad sent one short text. "Call your mother when you're ready to talk." I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. The shame sat on my chest like a weight I couldn't push off. At work, Clara and I were polite strangers. We only spoke about patients and schedules, never anything personal. I caught her looking at me sometimes, guilt written all over her face, but she never said another word. I think she knew that if she tried to apologize again, I might break down completely, or worse, say something cruel I couldn't take back. It was during one of those long, silent shifts that I realized just how fragile my FAS aide had become. A patient's mother thanked me for being so calm under pressure, and I almost laughed. Calm. I hadn't slept in 3 nights, startled me. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. I wasn't calm. I was hollow. By the end of the week, I couldn't take the quiet anymore. I decided to drive to my parents' house and face the storm head-on. The thought of knocking on that door made my stomach twist, but pretending everything was fine was worse. When I pulled into their driveway, the lights were still on. My dad opened the door before I even reached it. His face was a mixture of worry and disappointment. "Emily," he said, stepping aside to let me in. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she probably hadn't drunk. The air between us was thick, like the silence after a funeral. I sat across from her, my hands trembling slightly. "Mom," I started, "I need you to know that what Clara told you. It wasn't her place, but it was true. I was there. I was in that car. But I didn't cause the accident. I tried to stop it." She looked at me with tired eyes. "You should have told us." "I know," I said softly. "But I was terrified. You told me to forget it, and I thought if I never talked about it again, maybe it would stop existing." Her voice cracked. "Amelie, I was trying to protect you from it, not erase it." I felt my eyes sting. "You don't understand what it did to me. For years, I couldn't drive at night. Every time headlights came toward me, I froze. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. And every time I looked at you, I saw that night reflected back. You said we'd move on, and I thought that meant never mentioning it again." She wiped at her eyes. "We can't move on from what we bury alive, sweetheart. It always digs its way back up." That broke me. I cried harder than I had in years. For the first time, my mom reached across the table and took my hand. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. The silence between us was different now, not cold, but healing. I left that night feeling lighter. Like maybe forgiveness wasn't completely out of reach. But life has this cruel habit of giving you one breath of relief before pulling you right back under. The next morning, my phone rang while I was brushing my teeth. It was my supervisor at the hospital. "Emily, can you come in early today?" she asked. "There's something we need to discuss." My heart sank. Her tone was too formal, too serious. "Is everything okay?" "I think it's better we talk in person," she said. When I arrived, she was waiting in her office with another nurse from HR. My stomach dropped before they even spoke. "Emily," she began carefully, "we've received some concerns regarding your past. Something about a criminal investigation from a few years ago." My blood ran cold. "What?" She nodded, expression tight. "I don't know all the details yet, but someone called the hospital anonymously. They said you were involved in a fatal accident in California and that you might have lied about it on your employment application." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. "That's not true," I managed to say. "I wasn't charged with anything. I was cleared. I didn't lie." "I understand," she said calmly, "but we have to look into it. Until we do, we'll need to place you on temporary leave." It felt like the ground vanished beneath me. My career, the one thing that had given me purpose, stability, was suddenly hanging by a thread. I walked out of that office numb, my legs moving without direction. The whispers from the hallway nurses followed me all the way out to the parking lot. I sat in my car for nearly an hour before I could even start the engine. I knew exactly who had done it. Clara. Who else would know enough details to sound convincing? Maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe she said something in confidence to the wrong person. But either way, this was her doing. I drove straight to her apartment. She looked surprised when she opened the door, but not innocent. "Not anymore." "Emily, what?" "Did you call the hospital?" I demanded. Her face went white. "No. Of course not." "Why would I?" "Because someone did," I snapped. "Someone told them about California. About Ethan. About everything." Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked terrified, which told me more than words ever could. I didn't call them," she stammered. "But I might have said something to Lisa the other day. She asked why you'd been so upset lately, and I just said that you were dealing with something from your past. I didn't give details, I swear." "Lisa works in HR, Clara!" I shouted. "Do you even hear yourself?" The silence that followed was unbearable. She looked like she wanted to vanish into the floor. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think she'd take it anywhere. I was trying to defend you again." I laughed bitterly. "Defend me? You've practically destroyed me." Her eyes filled with tea. "Emily, please. I never meant." "I trusted you," I said, my voice shaking. "More than anyone. You knew how much this haunted me, and you turned my worst memory into office gossip. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" She started crying harder, reaching out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said quietly. "You've done enough." I left before she could say another word. The following week was the hardest of my life. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The hospital's investigation dragged on, though they eventually confirmed I hadn't lied or committed any crime. But the damage was done. The trust was gone. People looked at me differently now, like they were trying to see the ghost of the girl I used to be. I stopped answering calls, stopped checking texts. I even turned off social media. My world shrank to the size of my apartment, the walls closing in day by day. Every time I thought about Clara, a part of me ached. I missed her. I missed us. But I couldn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. One night, I sat in bed scrolling through old photos on my phone. There was one from the year before. Me and Clara at the hospital Christmas party. arms around each other, laughing so hard my eyes were closed. We looked like sisters, and now, we were strangers connected by a secret that had burned everything around us. I don't know when I started crying. It just happened. Quiet, exhausted sobs that left my pillow damp. That was the moment I realized something deeper. It wasn't just Clara's betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that I'd finally tried to open up, to share the truth, and the world had punished me for it. And somewhere inside, I started to wonder if the secret had never really been the problem. Maybe it was me, the woman who thought she could control how the truth would be received. But I was wrong. The truth never stays in your control once you release it. It finds its own way out. The morning after that breakdown, I woke up feeling strangely clear. Not calm, just empty in a way that felt almost peaceful. Like my mind had finally stopped running in circles. There was nothing left to chase, no truth left to control, no person left to convince. Everything had already happened. The secret was out. The damage was done, and all I could do now was decide who I wanted to be on the other side of it. It had been almost 3 weeks since I'd spoken to Clara, and in that time, the world had gone oddly quiet. My mom and I texted occasionally, short messages about everyday things, the kind that fill the silence without really saying anything. My dad checked in with small talk about the weather or football scores. It wasn't closeness, not yet, but it was connection. And for now, that was enough. The hospital reinstated me officially the following Monday. HR had cleared everything, confirming that there was no criminal record, no dishonesty. But it still felt hollow walking back through those doors. Some colleagues smiled politely, others avoided my eyes. I couldn't tell if it was pity or discomfort, and maybe it didn't matter. The whispers had already run their course, leaving behind that faint residue of judgment that never fully fades. During my lunch break, I sat outside near the staff garden. The air smelled like cut grass and coffee, and for the first time in weeks, I noticed how blue the sky was. I had almost forgotten that small, stupid details like sunlight could feel good. I was half listening to the birds when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Can I sit?" It was Clara. I froze for a second before answering. "It's a free bench." She sat down slowly, leaving space between us. She looked thinner, her face drawn and pale. The guilt was still there, visible in the way her shoulders hunched slightly inward. "I wanted to wait until things calmed down," she said softly. "I know I have the right to ask for forgiveness, but I needed to say I'm sorry again. Properly this time." I didn't say anything. I just stared at the grass, running my thumb over the seam of my cup. She took a deep breath. "I replay it all the time. The dinner, the conversation with your mom, the stupid thing I said to Lisa. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if people understood you'd been through trauma, they'd be gentler with you. But I was selfish. I didn't think about how exposing it would feel for you." I finally looked at her. "You didn't think at all." She nodded. "You're right, I didn't. I just kept trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix." The silence stretched between us, long and heavy. I could feel my anger simmering, but underneath it, there was something else. Exhaustion, mostly. I had spent so long hating her that it had turned into its own kind of cage. "Clara," I said quietly, "you hurt me more than anyone ever has. And it wasn't just about the secret. It was about trust. You took something that belonged only to me and gave it away. You don't come back from that easily." She nodded again, tears filling her eyes. "I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry, and I'll never talk about it again. Not to anyone." I wanted to believe her. Part of me still did. The thing about long friendships is that they're not just built on trust. They're built on history. You can't erase the years before the betrayal, even if you wish you could. After a long pause, I said, "I'm not ready to forgive you, but I'm tired of hating you." "Maybe that's a start." She exhaled shakily, like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "That's fair," she said quietly. "I'll take it." When she walked away, I didn't feel lighter exactly, but I did feel like I could breathe again. It wasn't closure, not yet, but maybe forgiveness wasn't about wrapping things up neatly. Maybe it was just about deciding to stop carrying the knife. That night, I went home and did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my old journal, the one I'd hidden at the back of my closet since California. The first page was dated 7 years ago. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. I started reading. March 3rd. I can still hear the brakes. I can still smell the smoke. I close my eyes and see the headlights coming toward us. Ethan was laughing, drunk, telling me to stop crying. Then it was just noise and glass and blood. I turned the page. March 7th. The cop said I wasn't at fault. But I know that if I had left him earlier, none of this would have happened. I should have known better. By the time I finished reading, my hands were trembling. I realized I had spent years trying to erase this version of myself. The scared, broken girl who thought she didn't deserve happiness because she'd survived something someone else didn't. But she was still inside me, waiting to be acknowledged. So I wrote her a letter. "You did the best you could. You loved someone who hurt you, and when everything fell apart, but you blamed yourself. But you didn't kill him. You tried to save him, and that matters." I didn't know if it was healing or just pretending to heal, but when I closed the journal, something shifted. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to hide from my own story. A few weeks later, I met up with my mom again. We went for a walk in the park. Something we hadn't done since I was a teenager. The leaves had started to turn gold, and the air carried that crisp scent of early autumn. She was quiet for most of the walk, then said, "You know, when you were little, you used to collect secrets. Do you remember that?" I laughed softly. "Vaguely. You had this little tin box you called your secret keeper. You'd write tiny notes, who you liked, things that scared you, and lock them inside. I wasn't supposed to read them, but once when you were at school, I did." I raised an eyebrow. "You did what?" She smiled faintly. "Just 1 or 2. And I remember thinking how much you trusted that box. It was your way of feeling safe in a world that sometimes wasn't. I think you've been trying to build versions of that box your whole life, just bigger ones. Friendships, jobs, relationships, trying to keep the truth safe inside something." Her words hit deeper than she probably realized. "Maybe," I admitted. "But boxes break. People talk." She nodded. "They do. But that doesn't mean the truth destroys you. Sometimes it just shows you who's strong enough to hold it with you." For a long moment we walked in silence, the wind rustling the trees above us. I felt something loosen in my chest, an ache I hadn't even noticed until it began to fade. It's been a few months now. The hospital stopped whispering. Mom calls me every Sunday. Clara and I still don't talk much outside work. But the distance isn't poisoned anymore. It's just space. I think we both need it. Sometimes I still think about Ethan. About that night. About how one bad decision can ripple for years. But I don't flinch anymore when headlights come toward me on the road. That's something. Last week, I started volunteering at a local support group for women who've been through trauma. I didn't tell them the full story, but I shared enough to see understanding in their eyes. And it struck me, maybe the secret was never meant to stay buried. Maybe it was meant to find its way out, not as a confession, but as a way to connect with people who've lived through their own kind of silence. Sometimes I still wake up at night thinking about what Clara said, about what my mom said, about how easily trust can shatter. But I've stopped wishing things had gone differently, because if they hadn't, I'd still be living like a ghost, untouched, unbroken, but unreal. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone scared, yes, but whole. Someone who survived both the accident and the fallout. And maybe that's what it means to truly move on, not to erase the story, but to finally tell it without shame. What do you think about this story? Did you expect this ending? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you want to see more.